Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, thank you for joining me today.
Nice to be with you, Sharri.
Now, you're creeping towards a federal election, but Bill Shorten is so far ahead in the polls that he even feels comfortable having his own input from policy to positions like the Governor-General, and he wants to say in the population policy as well. Is he right to be so confident?
Absolutely not. Bill Shorten is taking the Australian people for granted. He's showing great presumption in acting as if he has already won the election, wanting to veto appointments, threatening organisations that have received government grants not to spend the money because they won't honour the contracts if they're elected, and writing to the Prime Minister proposing a joint task force on population. Well, no one has told Bill Shorten, or certainly from his own side, that he's in opposition. He's not in government, and we've seen this behaviour from him before, Sharri. You might remember after the last election, he ran around the country doing a victory lap. But what we have seen from him in recent days is his 5-point plan. And that 5-point plan is for new taxes on your property, new taxes on your business, new taxes on your income, new taxes on your savings, and new taxes on your electricity bill.
One of the changes he is proposing to make in the property sector is to negative gearing. Now, you've said that these changes will mean that people's house prices, that the value of their home will fall. Have you or the Treasury done any modelling into just how much the value of people's homes will drop, how much property prices will drop if these negative gearing changes go through?
Well, Treasury have said it would put upward pressure in the short term or downward pressure in the short term on prices, and that would be particularly problematic coming at a time where the heat has come out of the housing market. And we've seen groups like CoreLogic and Riskwise and Citigroup all talk about the negative implications of Labor's new property tax. And we have seen the housing market dynamic change, moving away from investor-led growth to more owner-occupier-led growth. And we've seen the greatest number of first home buyers getting loan approvals in any time since the end of the GFC. So the market has changed, and Labor's property tax will decrease the public's value in their own home.
Has Treasury given you an idea of just the extent to which prices could fall?
As I said, Treasury have provided that advice, but you've also had commentary and analysis from a whole group of other reputable organisations. And Sharri, the key point here is Labor's policy is absolutely designed to drive property prices down. That's their intention, and it's coming at a time when the property market doesn't need that, because we've already started to see a correction.
Now, in a piece you wrote today, you've hit out at Bill Shorten's style of class warfare and wealth redistribution. You describe it as similar to Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders.
That's right.
The thing is that this approach does seem to be working for him, doesn't it? I mean, he's well ahead in the polls. He had a strong victory in Longman. I mean, isn't this working?
Well, one of the consequences of Labor's arrogance is that they are starting to give the Australian public a glimpse of what they would do in office. Now, $200 billion of new taxes is one series of the policies that they will implement. But they're also going to give the unions a seat at the cabinet table. And the unions are preparing for a grand feast at the cabinet table, except it will be the taxpayer who will be paying for this lunch. And we've already seen, under Bill Shorten, talk of union lawbreakers becoming union lawmakers, and the ACTU Secretary, Sally McManus, Wayne Swan, the incoming President of the Labor Party, and the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Andrew Lee, have all made it very clear that the unions having more power is what they believe to be the tonic to inequality. This goes against Australian experience. It will be a recipe for less jobs, less growth, less investment and more industrial disputation.
Now, last night on the show I interviewed the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, and he was very passionate about the amendment to the GST legislation that will ensure that no state is to be worse off under your new arrangements. He even went so far as to encourage senators from New South Wales to support the amendment if it goes to Parliament in the next fortnight. I mean, this would, if they do follow his advice, this could be a situation where you have Liberal senators, in effect, crossing the floor. Is this something you're worried about ahead of Parliament returning next week?
Well, we actually believe we've got the right national solution to what is a national problem, namely that the integrity of the GST was being threatened by the fact that Western Australia had gone down to just 30 cents in the dollar. So we went to the Productivity Commission. We sought their advice. States and territories provided data to the Productivity Commission, and the end result is that we've put forward a plan which will see a floor at 75 cents in the dollar, below which no state can fall, and the Commonwealth putting an additional $9 billion to the states and territories, including a legislated $1 billion plus going in every and each year in perpetuity. So New South Wales will be $351 million better off. Victoria will be $425 million better off. And Tasmania will also be better off.
The Treasurers did present modelling to you that showed in different economic scenarios, for example, if property prices fall in New South Wales or if the mining boom returns to WA, they could be billions of dollars worse off. If it is true what you say, that every state will be better off under this new arrangement, why not just put the legislation through? Why not just include the amendment in the legislation?
Well, the first thing to say, Sharri, is we actually are using the data provided by the states and territories and the Productivity Commission data. And we're putting more money in that would have never been there before, on top of the $6.5 billion that the states and territories are getting in additional GST payments, because we've extended it to online purchases and greater compliance activities.
And on the amendment?
But the reason why we're not running with the Labor and some of the Liberal states' proposal here is because it would lead to having two parallel systems. You'd have to run the old model, or the existing model as it's called, and then you'd have to run the new model simultaneously, a bit like running digital and analogue at the same time. Now, Bill Shorten went to Western Australia. He campaigned with Labor Premier Mark McGowan. He said he supported the Coalition's policy in this regard, its reforms and its legislation. So he can't walk both sides of the street.
You can't commit in legislation that none of the states will be worse off?
Well, we have absolutely said that none of the states will be worse off.
You've said it, but you won't put the
But what we
amendment
are
into the legislation.
in legislation is there'll be $1 billion plus put in each and every year that wouldn't have been there before.
Now, you're off to the G20 on Thursday. What's the main topic that you're keen to discuss and you're keen to raise on Australia's behalf?
We'll be talking about the international economy. It's 10 years on from the GFC. We'll be talking about some of the global trade tensions, obviously between China and the US in particular. It's not in Australia's interest for that to escalate. What we're focused on is ensuring an open, rules-based trading system. But this will be a good opportunity to meet with Australia's international partners to talk about the success of the Australian economy, because we're in a 27th year of consecutive economic growth, but also to take the temperature on the world economy and what other countries are seeing.
There's I can't even say a new plan, because we've been talking about this immigration plan since May now, when the telly first broke it. But there's more detail on a plan out today to force migrants to live in regional and rural areas, force them to stay there for up to 5 years. Do you agree as a Treasurer with lowering the immigration rate? Because past Treasurers, even Scott Morrison when he was in that position, had concerns that it would affect the budget position.
Well, my view, both from a personal experience, given my mother was born overseas and my grandparents have been born overseas, is that immigration is good for Australia. We have a wonderful story to tell of social harmony and multiculturalism, and migrants have helped make this country the great country that it is. That being said, there are some challenges around the growing population. I mean, Melbourne's growing by 2,700 people a week. We're adding a city the size of Canberra to the country each and every year. And 75% of the population increase over the last 5 years, Sharri, has been in the three largest population areas of Melbourne, Sydney and southeast Queensland. So even though we've seen the number of permanent visas come down to the lowest level in a decade, we do need to take measures, which Alan Tudge has foreshadowed today, to ensure that prospective migrants to this country get an opportunity to live and work in the regions and in the smaller states to alleviate some of the pressure.
This isn't talking about an opportunity. This is talking about binding them there, forcing them to stay there for up to 5 years. Isn't that unconstitutional?
Well, this is obviously a good policy that we are working through, and we're very confident that everything we do has a sound legal basis. But what we're focusing on is getting the best outcomes for those prospective migrants because they want to be in jobs, they want a good place to live for their family, but also for the economy as a whole and dealing with some of the congestion that we're seeing in our cities today.
Now, lastly, as a former Environment Minister, the IPCC report came out yesterday. It suggests that we should be all cutting back on our meat intake. Are you going to do that?
No, I'm a meat lover. We'll continue to do so. And Australia, Sharri, has been able to reduce its emissions at the lowest level on a per capita and GDP basis in 28 years, but also have an energy mix which includes coal, which includes gas, which includes renewables. We need to have an all-of-the-above approach, not the ideological, reckless approach that the Labor Party will bring, which will send everyone's power bill higher.
So you don't think we should follow the report's advice and walk away from coal-fired power by 2050?
If we did that, Sharri, the lights would go out on the east coast of Australia.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Good to be with you.